In this video, we'll pick up where we left off from the last video. We had just worked on a couple of examples, converting x values to z-scores and vice versa. So we're going to talk about how we can tell if these answers make sense. So in this example, we had IQ scores with a mean of 100 and a standard deviation of 15. One adult has an IQ score of 65. What is the z-score? We use the z-score formula. Did 65 minus 100 divided by the standard deviation equals negative 2.33. Now, I'm using a spreadsheet to illustrate how the z-scores can correspond with your x values. In the yellow bar, I have my mean in the center. As a z-score, your mean would be 0 because it's 0 standard deviations away from itself. And then as I move one standard deviation below the mean, I have negative 1. Another standard deviation gets me to negative 2 and negative 3. If I move above the mean, I have z-scores of 1, 2, 3. So I'm making jumps of standard deviations. And remember, z-scores represent the number of standard deviations that a value is away from the mean. So corresponding to the z-score of 0, 0 standard deviations from the mean, that's 100, the actual mean. When I move one standard deviation below the mean, that corresponds to the z-score of negative 1, and I have an IQ score of 85. Jump again, and I have 70. Jump again, and I have 55, and so on. Now, this answer was we took the 65, we converted it to a z-score using the z-score formula. But here I can see 65 falls between 55 and 70, which was 1, 2, and almost a half jumps. Now, negative 2.33 makes sense because that falls between negative 2 and negative 3 on the z-score scale. We also did an example where we converted from a z-score. An IQ score is 1.37 standard deviations below the mean. That translates to a negative z-score, negative 1.37. Since it's below the mean, we know it's negative. We use the x formula to get 79.45 as an IQ score. So taking my z-score of negative 1.37, using the formula of the mean plus the standard deviation times the z-score, and negative 1.37 lies on the z-scale in between negative 1 and negative 2. And the answer we got lies between 70 and 85. 85 is 1 standard deviation below the mean, and 70 is 2 standard deviations below the mean. So it makes sense that my IQ score lines up here. In the next video, we'll talk about how you can make a calculator like this.